What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. The Hounds just got a massive win over Sacramento, and I think that deserves a well-earned let's go! Yeah, so like I said, massive 1-0 win. I am Mike. Joining me for this one is Steve and Justin. Steve, how's it going, man?
Good. Started pickling yesterday, so I got 12 quarts done yesterday. I've got another peck that I'll have to get done probably tomorrow. Out on my bike this morning, take advantage of the mostly decent weather when it's not random thunderstorms. It's good.
Are you pickling primarily pickles?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is all cucumbers. I'll do. I stopped trying to grow cucumbers because I just can't get enough to pickle at once. So I just buy them at the farmer's market. But eventually, I'll have so many tomatoes that I'll make tomato jam, and then I'll probably do some pickled carrots and some pickled radishes at some point.
That's awesome. We had gone through a period where we were trying to grow tomatoes, and it was always a struggle for us for whatever reason. And then we realized that we could get a bushel from like a local farmer for like next to nothing. So we're like, we'll do that, support the local farmer, and then we'll cut them up and freeze them and have them all year.
Yeah, so I can't get through the summer anymore if I don't have fresh tomatoes like every few days to make tomato sandwiches. It's my favorite summer meal.
Yeah. Agreed. Justin, what's good, man?
I mean, I'm trying to stay awake today. I hate these West Coast games. We talked about that on Friday. But it ruins my Sunday when we have these late night games. It's like, I can't. I had a busy day today anyway. But things are good. We had a great weekend. Got to do some fun family things this weekend. So pretty fun stuff.
Good. Yeah, it feels like we're just picking right back up from where you and I finished up on talking on Friday. Just like, I hate these late night games. Yeah. I mean, that gets to just sort of a slight pet peeve of mine. So obviously the game was on the West Coast. It was on ESPN2. And I don't know if we talked about this before, but anytime the game is on ESPN2 or on CBS, I see it as a positive for the league, but the more that I think about it, the more I question just how big of a positive it actually is. If you're actually looking at the demographics of who's watching these games, and are you actually restricting access to people who typically watch the games? So, for someone like myself, I don't pay for cable. I do everything streaming. And so trying to get, something that is on CBS or on ESPN2, they black it out. You have to basically have a cable provider in order to watch those things. And so, a game that I would normally watch and support, I can't. But then that's in the hopes that maybe there's a national audience that's like taking my spot, which I'm not entirely convinced is happening. But that might be an interesting conversation to have at some point with the league president. So I don't know. Steve, where do you stand on this whole like national broadcast thing?
I mean, selfishly, yeah, I hate it because it makes it so hard to watch the game. So a 7:00 game, okay, right? Like I'll go to a friend's house, might go down to the Steel Army watch party. But at 10:00, I mean, there's no way I was going to go all the way down to Morningside for a 10 p.m. kickoff, right? Like it's just not going to happen on a Saturday night. And so it is frustrating because I hadn't even thought about that. And I went to go watch it. And then I was like, are they still on KDKA Plus? No, they're not on KDKA Plus. So like, you can't even use that as a workaround, right? Like, which is just like, come on, like, just want to watch the Hounds, and like having to jump through all these hoops is not fun.
Part of me like kind of sort of misses the days when it was back on YouTube, but I know that was just a bit too progressive for a lot of people. Justin, or is this just me and Steve problems, or do you have this problem as well?
No. I watched the game last night on a Russian streaming website with no audio. So that's how I watched the game last night, in complete silence. on a Russian streaming site because I did not have the ability to watch it on ESPN.
I mean, I guess that's the great thing, right? It was on a Russian streaming site.
Yeah. So, something to work out with the league. We'll see what happens. Interestingly enough, I had a conversation with a Detroit fan, something for everyone to look forward to. I think maybe we'll air it on Tuesday. But we were talking about sort of similar things around the league and some of the struggles that everyone else is having, that it's not just us. We're not in this little bubble. So stay tuned for that. That was a pretty good one. And I did go so far as just to ask them, like, how do you feel about the fact that everybody hates you guys? And like got an honest opinion. So it was great. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Nice.
Really good. Yeah. But let's talk about this game in particular, guys. Pure excitement because, hey, thanks. Somebody found my headphones. Pure excitement because the Hounds ended up walking away with this with a 1-0 win. Justin, you and I talked about this where we said ideally you go in, you take the point from Sacramento, you aim for 3 points against Detroit in the middle of this week, but we got all three. So
you know what that calls for?
Oh, what does that call for, Steve?
Victory beverage. And I like this one a lot. And it's called Talking Trash. So like I think this is a fitting victory beverage for tonight.
Yes.
We're gonna talk trash.
Yes. Justin, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing for me, and the first thing I said to Laura Ellen this morning, because she was not staying up for this game, I said the Hounds really gutted one out last night, and I felt like that was the key. It wasn't always pretty, wasn't always easy, but they gutted it out. You know what I mean? And I think for me, just real quickly, I went and looked at Sacramento's other Eastern Conference matchups this season. The 6th place team in the conference, Loudoun, lost. The 11th place team, Hartford, lost. The 12th place team, Miami, lost. 7th place, Detroit, also lost. Rhode Island, Birmingham, and North Carolina managed to get ties. The only other team to take 3 off of Sacramento this season in the Eastern Conference was Tampa. And so I look at that and say, hey, look, we just gained at least 2 points on every other team. We're fighting for a playoff spot right now. That's 2 points gained. And so no matter how you look at this game, you can, and I'm sure we'll do it. You can nitpick and you can, well, this and that, and why did this thing happen and why did that thing happen, and at the end of the day, they got 3 points, and that's the key. And so I'm real happy with what happened. I think, like I said, we can nitpick them, the things that didn't go well, but at the end of the day, we won the game, got 3 points, and we head into Detroit in a pretty good spot. So,
yeah. Going into this, you and I sort of talked about the way I saw it, there were sort of 3 storylines as we were heading into it. One was sort of the old faces. So the Shane Wheat, the Russell Cicerone, Danny Vitiello. Russell Cicerone didn't play in this one, so he was a non-factor. I think a lot of eyes were on Danny Vitiello, which we'll get to in a second. I had the question of, have we lost our scoring touch again? The fact that we got a goal from a forward during run of play makes me think, no. Are we going to get 5 every game? Probably not. But, the guys still know that they can score. We're not going back into a drought, which is great. And then just the concept of a playoff push and the fact that we got 3 points to kind of keep bumping ourselves up the list is good. So I think that all those were addressed. I think there's some new storylines that emerge. But, Steve, I'll sort of throw to you. How are you feeling after this one? Do you have any sort of takeaways or anything you want to talk about?
I mean, my feeling going to bed last night and waking up this morning is one of just relief. Because in the moment I was following along on the USL match tracker and Steel Army Discord, and it was back to some of those old days of a 1-0 lead of just right, and that we didn't give up a late goal, that we locked it down, that Dick played as well as he did, yeah, relief. And I think that's the thing, though, right? The team, as Justin said, gutted this out, but it's not that it wasn't for lack of Sacramento playing well, but it was Eric Dick having the best game a keeper has had in a long, long time.
Yeah, eight saves, most since Mauricio Vargas made 8 in a 1-0 loss against Cincy in 2016. So,
which, like, on the one hand, is mind-boggling to me that nobody else has done that. But then on the other hand, it's a testament to how good our defense has been over the past 6.5 years. Right, that there's never been a need for 8 saves to happen.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. And if you go back and, you watch through sort of the extended highlights, not all of them were easy saves.
No.
And I mean, there were some rockets that he, sort of kept his glove on and didn't give up a rebound.
Mm-hmm.
And B, he, I think I mentioned in the last, I can't remember if it was a reaction show or one other one. I said that I still kind of felt that both Asumanu and Dick were a bit of a liability, because in whatever game it was, Dick was still sort of fumbling rebounds into dangerous areas. And there was really none of that in this one. There was one rebound that he kind of deflected, not necessarily at a player, but there was a player there. And then he was able to make the secondary save and deflect it over the bar. But yeah, I mean, Justin, we've had this conversation almost ad nauseum all season, but is this now Dick's position to lose?
Yeah, Bob's not going to shift at this point in the season. I think he found the keeper he likes, and he's just going to stick with Dick for the end of the season. And I think he's earned it, in a lot of ways. And we talked a lot about, I don't know if in the course of the season, if the keepers were ever the problem.
Yeah.
But I think Dick has been the best one. And by I mean slightly the best one. I just don't know that there has been anybody who's, it's like nobody's head and shoulders above anybody else in that position right now. But I think at this point, it has seemed, it feels like 5 or 6 straight that he's started now. So I don't think Bob's shifting at this point in time.
Yeah. If you look at it statistically, he has the better numbers. I think what's interesting is that sometimes you'll have players that they pass the eye test, but statistically you're like, are they really that good? And I feel like it's the opposite for Dick. I think statistically he looks good, but then there are times with the eye test where you're like, oh, come on, guy. So yeah. But yeah, it is interesting, in a game where I would have thought a lot of eyes on Danny Vitiello, considering how well he's done since he's gone out there, it's Dick that comes out on top. So kudos to him.
Well, and not only Dick coming out on top, but Dick coming out on top where both keepers had to play last night.
Yeah.
It's not like Danny had an easy night for Sacramento. The Hounds made him make some saves. The Hounds made him have to move around in the box, even if it wasn't on frame. I mean, he was working. He was playing well. But, I mean, that goal was just – what a goal.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the goal, right? I think that we've all rightly given Kizza a lot of shtick over the course of the season. He hasn't scored a ton. There have been a number of times that he's sort of flubbed his chances, but this was an opportunity where the pass came in from Griffin. There was sort of a back and forth. It started with a throw in from, I think, Etu, and then it went Griffin to Mertz, back to Griffin to Kizza, who sort of made a dummy little move and really didn't touch the ball until he shot it. It kind of rolled across the front of him, and then he just ripped it. And Vitiello guessed where it was going, but had no shot at catching that ball. Yep. So, I mean, thoughts on Kizza, after sort of performance like that, Justin?
I mean, you can't say anything bad about it after that kind of performance. I think, and what I thought was great last night is you saw what it meant to him. I was kind of like, all right, cool, you got us 1-0 up. Like his celebration in some ways seemed over the top. It was like, okay, we're 1-0 up in the middle of a regular season game in 20 minutes into the game on the West Coast. Like there's a lot of game left to be played. But also then I go, okay, well, he hasn't scored in 2 or 3 months now. And so like, it's going to mean something to him when he scores. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he plays better in the next couple. And I thought he looked good for the rest of the time he was in the game last night too. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see him sort of light it up over the next couple of weeks, just because I think it felt like it unlocked something for him of like, okay, finally got that, finally got the goal. And now I can can go. The other thing I'd say, kind of just about scoring, is it's talked about have we lost our scoring touch? Well, what was Sacramento's goals against average? 0.75 or something like that, and like we increased their goals against average. However much you want to say, and I feel like that's even though you can't score half a goal in a game, but we didn't score 0. So I think I think that's important too. Is you're not going to score 3 or 4 against Sacramento. There's been looking through their results real quick, there's been very few teams who have even scored 2. And so getting 1 against them is a pretty good indication that you might have a chance to win the game. So thought it was great.
Yeah. So you brought up the celebration, and like my first reaction was, wow, is that a slap in the face to Shane? Because that's the goal celebration that we saw first with Shane Wheat the first time he scored a goal. Then I was like, oh no, that was the celebration that they did when they were students at Pitt. Like it was a team thing. And both of them have carried it on to their pro careers. And I think Arturo did it as well at one point. Like he didn't do it as much, but like that, like dig one out was kind of their thing for a couple seasons at Pitt. So it's just kind of funny to see it in the game where Shane was already out, but like knowing that I've seen Shane Wheat do that a couple times as well at Highmark. But then remembering back, like asking about that to both of them over the years, that like seeing that continue years later is kind of fun. And yeah, just like that kind of thing. Right. Like, and so I'm just wondering, like Shane's in the training room or something, watching that, like, what's his thought in that moment? Like, I love to see my guy score, but man.
That celebration.
One question that I had is that, we've spent a lot of time talking about EJ heading into this game. I talked to him as he head there. EJ played in the first half, and then Lily pulled him at halftime and put in Sterling instead. Was there context around why, or do we think it might have been tactical? Anything? I
think it's tactical. Was it 2 weeks ago at home? Same thing happened. And in the postgame, Bob talked about how happy he was with EJ's performance, but he just wanted a little different tactical look. So I mean, not having been able to watch the whole first half minute by minute, there's nothing that I could identify, obviously, right? But I'd be hesitant to say that it's a unhappy with the player type of thing. Maybe an injury, but I think more it's Bob tinkering as Bob has tinkered and just trying to keep fresh legs on and do something a little different. And it could just be like, hey, we're up. Let's get a guy in there that has a little bit better hold-up play rather than the guy that's just going to keep running at the guys but be more prone to giving the ball away.
Yeah. We mentioned a little bit about the fact that Sample would not be playing in this one because of a red card that he picked up. So our midfield was basically Walty, Griffin, and Mertz. Mertz back in sort of that number 10 position that he's kind of shifted into. Justin, do you think Sample's lost his spot? Is it Walty and Griffin and Mertz is to lose at this point?
No, I don't think so. And I think the reality of a good team is you need to have more than 3 midfielders. Mm-hmm. And so I look at it and go, okay, we have 4. You want to throw Kenny in there? We've got 5. And Kenny's not going to play full games anymore. At his age and his, it's this stage in his career, but he can still play. And I thought he played well in the second half last night. But I think he, when you have 5 or 6 midfielders, you can be doing some of that rotation. I will say I love Mertz at the 10. And I do think some of what he even said when you talked to him about, hey, I'm not the fastest guy out there. I'm not the best ball handler in the world, but I can pop up in spots and I can pick the times where I want to attack and I can find the pockets of space that the defense are giving me. And he does. He's a pest to defenders because he just shows up in weird spots at times. And it's like, oh, wait, what? You're there? You're like, where did you come from? And so I really like him there. And I do think with any of our midfield combinations, we can play him there. I do think even with Sample in, we can. I do like Walty with Griffin and Mertz because it just does give us a little bit of defensive stability in the midfield. But I thought Mertz played really well.
Yeah. Steve, do you think that we're going to see any more tinkering, or do you think that Bob will just let Mertz play in that 10?
I mean, I think we'll see tinkering until we get to the last month of the season. I've watched Bob for This is the 7th season, right? Like every year, and then it's the last 2, 3, maybe 4 games of the season where he rolls out the same starting 11, assuming everybody's healthy. So yeah, expect to see things change. I think we'll see Walty sit after a great game at some point. I think we'll see Robbie not in a starting 11 at some point in the next few weeks for some reason, right? And why? Bob, that's why.
Yeah. One other note that I had, and then I want to get to any other takeaways that you guys have, was that it was just a positive to see that Hogan got some minutes towards the end of this game after sort of he had back-to-back games with some pretty serious injuries. And we had heard that behind the scenes, he was sort of, they were monitoring from him for a few other things and just making sure that he's back where he needs to be. So the fact that he even got a few minutes in this one is a positive, because I think that without him, it definitely feels like there is no depth at the center back position. So we're really going to need him down the stretch to push some of the other guys as well. So that's definitely a big positive.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's great to see him back on the field. I mean, when I heard the extent of his injuries, it was like, that's the type of thing that could end a career.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I mean, I talked to him a couple weeks ago. I mean, fortunately, everything came back positive for him.
Not negative. Yeah.
The results were in his favor
Yes.
with all the tests and whatnot. But he was still waiting on the actual physician, not just the team docs, to give him the all clear, because that's the way that it has to happen, I guess. But he was really positive. Like, he was like, yeah, I should be back to training and whatnot. And just like seeing the difference on his face, like he was in a much better spirits than he had been, I think, the week before, where he was over with the guys, and just like you could tell, like he just wanted to be out there. It was just no idea what was going on yet. So I think that's a huge positive outside of whatever would have happened in this game, just to see him back on the field.
Yeah, agreed. What else? What other takeaways from this one? Justin, do you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I probably have a couple, but I think probably the one that I was thinking about just now was, you mentioned that 84th minute substitution. Probably the weirdest substitution I've seen from Bob in a while, pulling Sterling, who you just put at halftime, off for Rovey after you had just put Deanne on 5 minutes before that. And I didn't really understand that substitute. Like, I'm like, why did you put Deanne on if you're just going to pull a striker? Maybe he was hoping, hey, in the next 5 minutes, maybe we can get a goal, and then we can go into the last 10 minutes of the game 2 up. But that's probably unlikely. And so I thought that was, and I don't think it was anything Sterling was doing wrong. And Sterling hasn't played in a while. So maybe you go, okay, we got him 40 minutes real quick. Let's make a sub and go on to the next game and get Sterling a few more minutes there or whatever. So maybe there was some other stuff happening there, but I thought that was one of the weirder substitution patterns we've seen for Bob in a while, to be like, put a striker on the 75th, pull a striker in the 84th, who you just put on at halftime. I don't know. Weird, but I feel like we go back and like, I could nitpick all I want, but like we won the game. So, I do think what you said about Hogan kind of pushing some of the other guys, I do feel like as good as the game was, I think Osamanu and Biazzi in particular both need hey, there's a guy who could take your spot if you're not careful. I thought we talked about some of the saves that Dick made. There was one in the second half, kind of big rocket shot from the corner of the box, kind of similar to our goal, actually, that Dick kind of reached out and actually caught it, which I was surprised that he caught it. And I thought, but the center back play and the way they kind of gave him the inside route to the goal, I was like, you got to step up to that and kind of meet him there so he's not able to hit that shot. And so there was just some weird plays like that I thought, man, if we had another center back who's kind of pushing these guys for minutes, it might light a fire that needs to be lit in some way or shape or form. But again, I think, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, you have to follow up results with results. And so I think this game doesn't matter unless you go and get 3 in Detroit. So it's It's important.
I mean, the center back thing, I think, is an interesting conversation, right? Because when Pat was in, you had Suber most likely playing off of the right and Biasi off of the left, correct? Or something like that. The past few weeks, Suber has played in the middle and has been pretty consistent. Do you think that Hogan plugs right back into the middle and that pushes Suber out wide? Or Steve, how do you think that shakes out?
I think that's what Bob decides, because I think Sean is a faster defender. And without another really fast center back among those guys, right? Like, I think Alal can get there, but his speed off the line, I think, is a little slower. Once he gets moving, he's quick. But I think that's the question, right? Like, if it's Hogan, which one of those other guys is the odd man out? Is it Osamano? Is it Biasi? I could make a case for why it should be either one of them that he comes in for. But I think just the experience that Pat has, putting some faster guys around him, is probably the decision that Bob makes. But I don't know. I mean, last year he kept Arturo as that center back most of the year, and he was the fastest of any of the center backs we had, right? And so, it's so hard to tell. But I do think Sean has cemented his place in that back three at this stage. Yeah. He's clearly shown that the only center back that is at that level with him is Pat Hogan when he's at his best.
Yeah, agreed. And, kudos to him, because I remember early in the season, I was giving him flack. I won't say whether or not anyone else was, but there were some games that he had not good games. And I mentioned it to him, and he was just like, yeah, well, I had to work through it, and here I am. And he's just gotten progressively better over the course of the season. So that's good. That's what you want to see.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the things that we don't talk about enough with Bob is like his development of center backs. Yeah. And the center backs that we've sent around the league to play, who are starting, who are good, solid, back to the days of Tommy V. Tommy V had a couple good years after leaving Pittsburgh. Shane Veet is now having some good years, after leaving Pittsburgh. So I think it's pretty amazing how Bob can take these guys who I don't know, I don't know that if under another coach they would be able to develop the way that they do, but Bob seems to be able to make them good and turn them into guys who can play in this league. And so I think Suber's just another example of that, of a guy who may have been struggling kind of coming into the season and trying to figure out how do we play at this level and all of that kind of stuff. And now he's good and he's playing well. And so I think, we'll see what happens, but Suber's probably one of the names that I'm like, all right, when we see the picked up options list at the end of the year, Suber's one of those names that I'm sure hoping is on that list.
Yep.
Yeah. Agreed. Sort of the flip side of that, I think when we were in that stretch of games where, 8 games where we only scored once, I think a lot of us were kind of holding out hope that somebody would come in from, the MLS, or we'd pick up somebody from somewhere. At this point, we've in the last 4 games, we have 3 wins and a draw. So obviously the season's up and down. We can't judge everything just on the last 4 games, but are you guys looking elsewhere at this point and hoping that we're bringing in anybody to shore anything up? Or do you feel good about what we have heading down the stretch here for the rest of the season? Steve, where do you stand on that?
I don't expect us to bring anybody in. And if we do, it's going to be one of those weird Bob Lilly, bring back a guy that has played for him, that is on the out somewhere, just to kind of shore something up, right? Like I'm thinking of Ray Lee when he made his return to Pittsburgh after Hartford or something for a little bit. Like he was always a player that Bob liked a lot of his qualities, but always had something about that. Like Bob was like, he needs to be better. Or I think in Lee's case, right? It was just like, he's just not fast enough, right? Like he's not a fast outside back. But then Bob brings him back in to shore up the defense, right? Like who's the other big guy, the center back? Todd Pratzner, right? Like barely played, right? Like, I mean, he was probably 5th choice center back when he was here the first time, and then Bob brings him back.
Yeah. Justin, are you looking anywhere else, or do you think we're good? Let's run.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question to answer because I was thinking about a clip that you had posted of Josh sometime in the middle of the season being like, "Hey, I don't think we have the pieces."
Yeah.
And it's like, it's interesting because now we're a month past that, or you probably posted that clip a month ago or so, and it's like, I I still thought at that time we had the pieces. They just needed to come together, and I still feel like there's an element of that, of like the pieces still need to come together a little bit. We went out and got Musha Galusa, so that that's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but we went out and got him. So I think like it's interesting to see what might happen. But I don't think we're gonna pick up anybody. I think that was kind of our pickup, middle of the season pickup. Let's push the strikers a little bit more. Let's hopefully put a little more pressure on them by bringing a guy in. But I don't see us making a big splash move. I would probably line up with Steve that if there is a move, it's going to be a weird, like, hey, this guy's just not playing for Miami and he wants out and wants to maybe be on a playoff team, and maybe, we can trade a spot for that or something. But I just don't see us making a huge move before the end of the season.
Yeah. I think I agree with everything that you guys have said. I was just curious, are the pieces coming together in a way that we're happy with, or do we still think that we're one puzzle piece away from a full squad? And I agree with the sentiment that it feels like we're progressing towards that place where we're not missing a piece. It's just that those pieces need to, be filling their roles just a little bit better. So it'll be very telling. The next few games, in particular, I mentioned we're going to be in Detroit on Wednesday, and then we have 2 home games, both against Western Conference teams, to kind of see if we can pick up some points. At this point, with the team sort of being as hot as they are, it'd be great if it was against other Eastern Conference teams, so that it's more of a 6-point swing rather than just points. But we got to take what we can get. Guys, any other takeaways from this one? But before we do, just talk briefly about Detroit and San Antonio.
Now, I'd say a 1-0 win on the West Coast. Like, you got to be happy with that. And, and then I think you got to follow it up with something. And so you got to follow it up with a big win in Detroit. And I think if you get that big win in Detroit, you look at those games, you say, yeah, I'd be happy with 4, but we got 6, and that's, okay, we picked up 2 more points than we thought we might be able to. And so real happy with what happened last night, as long as it's followed up with another win.
Yeah. I look at kind of the trend of what's happening in the East. There's only a few teams that have had as good or better of a run in the past 5 games, right? So Charleston, same amount of points in their past 5 games, distributed a little differently. Tampa Bay, Louisville, kind of a little bit ahead of us. Rhode Island a little bit ahead of us in that stretch. But every other team is dropping points when we're not dropping points in that, right? So if we're getting 10 points out of 5 games for the rest of the season, that's where I think we're looking at things. We're saying, okay, so we've got, 12 games left? So we get 20 more points and then pick up 3 or 4 out of those last other 2 games. I think that is really good, and really where I think we need to be in that playoff position, right? Like I looked back last week or so. It's like something like, the average 8th place team is somewhere in the like 42 to 46 point range at the end of the season. That's doable if we're playing for the next 12 games like we've been playing for the past 5 games, and that's encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at the table, we kind of have it up on the screen right now, and those of you listening can't. But really, we have 25 points, and we're sitting in 10th place. The number 4 spot is at 32, so we're 7 points back from 4th, which doesn't feel like a lot, but in a lot of ways, the Eastern Conference standings this year feel a little bit more like the Western Conference is usually, where you kind of have the big teams at the top, but then there's just sort of this mix in the middle to the bottom. Everybody except for Miami. Miami only has 8 points for the season, but even Hartford, who's beneath us, they're only 3 points back on us. I think all of those spots are in contention, and everyone's going to be battling out for them. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I haven't gone back and done this. I usually wait till it's a little closer to the end of the season because it's just a lot of work to do it with this many games left. But what are the possible points that each team can pick up?
Yeah.
Especially against other playoff teams or potential playoff teams in the East. There's a double-edged sword for the Hounds that we have so many Western Conference games left where we can't get a 6-point swing. But the benefit of that is that we can go out if we can win those games, right? Like we're just getting points. And if the East Coast opponents are playing each other, well, somebody's dropping points and we're not in a game like that, right? And that's a kind of another way to look at it rather than just, oh, we could pick up 6 points. But if we don't pick up 6 points, it's kind of worse to draw 1-1 against, say, Loudoun or Hartford than it is to go out, have them draw 1-1 with someone else and go out and get 3 points against San Antonio, right?
Yeah. Guys, real quick. So we likely won't have a prediction show prior to the Detroit game just because the game is on Wednesday and we sort of have a packed schedule. We'll see if we'll do one for San Antonio, maybe. But just a little bit of background on both of those games. Detroit, this is going to be their 4th of 5 games in 2 weeks, which is insane. The stretch is actually bigger than that. Like I think it's been 9 games over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks, which is just a ton. And Detroit came out like gangbusters early in the season. They came to Highmark. We kind of smacked them down there, and then they've kind of been middling ever since then. I think they lost 2 of their last 3, and then they drew against Rhode Island last night and like a 93rd minute goal that Rhode Island put in, so they were up. But it sounds like, and like I said, we'll get the insider show that they've been giving up a lot of really late goals. But regardless, we're going to be going to Detroit against a tired team. Specifically, this is their 4th of 5 games in 2 weeks. And so, there's a massive opportunity there for us. And then this weekend, San Antonio is coming here. They've lost their last 3, and they're currently 11th in the West. They're outside of the playoff line. So my question for you guys is, based on all of that, Justin, you and I talked a little bit about Sacramento and Detroit, and we said if you can get 4 points, that feels really good. Considering that we got 3 points this weekend, considering everything I just said about Detroit and San Antonio, if I put the over-under at 4.5 points for this week, are you taking the over or the under, Justin? Where do you stand on that?
I definitely want the over.
Yeah.
I will take the under with the caveat that 3 of them come against Detroit. And so I think if 3 of them come against Detroit and you go to, San Antonio, we draw on the weekend against San Antonio, I'm okay with that. I think, we need the points against Eastern, like we just talked about. We need the points against the Eastern Conference opponent. I look at the next 5 games, before the end of August. We play Birmingham, we play Indy 11, who are both 6 or 7 points ahead of us. And so, Detroit's 4, Birmingham and Indy are 6 or 7, and so I think it's like, we just got to get those points against those teams, because when we get 3 against those teams, it becomes a bigger swing. And so, if you get 1 against Detroit, they still maintain their 4-point gap. You get 3, and now we're down to a 1-point gap on the playoff positions. And so I think this is such a huge game on Wednesday. I'm still going to say it's not a must-win game. We still have 12. So I'm still going to back off of that statement. I'll still be that guy. But it's a really important game to get 3 points and probably bigger than we've seen in a while. So I think this is a big game for sure.
If and when we do open up sort of the Mongols merch, there's just going to be a shirt that says not a must win. And that's just I will send you like 10 of them, and you can just wear them every day of your life. Totally fine.
I saw on our recording software how you can put a title in, like you can put your name and then a title, and I almost put not a must-win game as my title. But I didn't do it tonight. Next time I'm on.
Good. Steve, 4.5. You taking the over or under?
I think I take the under, and in these two games, I don't care where the points come from. But I do think we're getting extremely close to must win, right? And so is this the must win game? No. But is 3 or 4 out of the next 5 must win games? Yes, right? And so kind of what I was saying before, right? Like I want to see us getting 10 points in the next 5 games. So whatever gets us there, right? Like and do what we can do in that, right? Like we're not going to get all the points for the rest of the season, but if we can get 12, 13, 14, 15 points for the rest of the season, I feel really good. And so 4 points in this gets us, like, that's great progress towards that. So, yeah.
I mean, listen, we talked about, and Lily sort of joked about it, where we said, was the Oakland game sort of a turning point for the season? And the only way that we're going to know is we're going to get to the end of the season and then sort of see everything that happened after that. But everything that's happened since that Oakland game has been positive. And I think if we are able to get 6 points over these next 2 games, we're going to look back at this stretch and go, holy crap. Like, considering the hole that we dug ourselves in, I'm not even certain that 6 points is going to put us above the playoff line come this weekend, just because of how everything else will shake out. But it's going to get us a heck of a lot closer. And at that point, I don't think we're a team that anyone is going to want to play. And that's a pretty good position to be. I think a lot of people are going to look and be like, Pittsburgh, they're below the playoff. A lot of fans will look and say, Pittsburgh, they're below the playoff line. And they might, we might lull them into a false sense of security and then sneak up on them. So,
Yeah. But I mean, same time we're playing Detroit, Indy's playing Rhode Island, right? And so a win for Pittsburgh and a loss for Detroit and Rhode Island, that's huge in the standings for us. And so it's those types of things where you're going to see teams like Rhode Island playing teams like Indy that one of those teams is going to drop points, and maybe all the points. Okay, so go out and get as many points as you can when you can and move up that table. Like, don't worry about that, because that'll happen.
Are you sure you don't care about where we get the points?
I don't care overall. I want to beat Detroit. Like, yeah. So I went kind of back and forth, right? Like, I'm okay with 4 points. Like, when I step back and say, what do we need out of this? Do I want to take the over? 100%. But I'm going to try to be a little more realistic and say 4 points out of 2 games is great.
Yeah, agreed.
Looking at the rest of the schedule, so we have 12 games left, 3 of them against Western Conference opponents, including the last week of the season. I just look at it and say, okay, we have to get more points in those Eastern Conference games than we do. Then it is important to get points in those Western Conference games. And I think you don't want to lose. We're not going to win all 12 games. And we're probably not going to go on an unbeaten, what would it be, 15, 16 games at this point. I don't think we're going to go unbeaten for the last 16 games of the season. Now, it's Bob. So could we go unbeaten for the last 16 games of the season? Of course. But I think as long as we're getting, like you said, Steve, as long as we're getting that 2 points per game, doubles our, we're now at 50 points for the season, come the end of the season, which is going to be, that's not a mark that misses the playoffs.
Right.
And so I think, you're looking and saying, can you get a win every other game from now until the end of the season? We'll be just fine by the time we get there.
I love it. Guys, any other thoughts to add?
What are you taking, Mike?
I'm taking the over just because why not? Listen, I think that Detroit, it sounds like they are in a state similar to Monterey, although that came back to bite us, where if you get in their heads early, then they could start to lose it. Even to the point that when you look at their most recent run of games, they're back in that mental state of letting up a lot of goals late. Defensively, they're just not keeping it together. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think what's curious is if we go back and look at all our games, and I don't have the stat in front of me, I don't know how many goals we've actually scored late. I don't think many. I think most of our goals are in first half, early second half, and that's kind of it. So I don't know if we can use that to play in our favor. Regardless, it feels like anytime we go to Detroit, it's a smackdown, drag them out kind of battle. So I'm going to just try to be optimistic because I was so pessimistic early this season and say that I'm going to take the over and say that we get 3 or 6 points and, see what kind of conversation we're having on Sunday. But I don't know how realistic. I'll be happy with 4. I'm with you guys. If we can average 2 per game, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So great. Yeah. But yeah, any other kind of final thoughts on just the team or the performance or what you're hoping to see this week? Since, like I said, I don't know if we'll have prediction shows or not.
Good games, right? Like I want to see us continue to build on both the really good performances and the strong defensive performances, even if everything else is not as good as it could be, and scoring goals, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, we've scored 5, 3, 1, and 1, right, in the past 4 games. That's great. We need to keep doing it, and with the 5, 3, 1, and 1, right? Like that is okay, sure. Have we lost the scoring touch? No, but we kind of got a little lucky in a couple games. Is our scoring touch a goal a game? And if so, what does that do for us, right? So our defense has to be stellar the rest of the season, has to be great in these next 2 games. And we need to keep scoring a goal or more over the course of the next few games.
I'd love to see a 2-goal game out of these next 2. Like that would make me feel really good. Justin, any kind of final thoughts on this?
No, the other thing is this is your last midweek game, so you don't need to do a ton of rotation this game. Like, yeah, I mean, it's busy. You've got you got 3 games in 8 days this week, but after that, you're sitting at every Saturday, from here to the end of the season, we're playing. And so I think we can put a little bit more into this game to go, okay, let's go win in Detroit. Let's not feel like we've got to save people for the weekend or, do a ton of rotation. Yeah, you probably should see a little bit of rotation. But at this point in time, you can kind of go all out because after that, you're a game a week until the end of the season. The benefit of that is we do have a game a week till the end of the season. The downside of that is we have a couple games in hand on the teams above us in the line who they've got a couple midweek games left. So, yeah, we've got to figure that out. But I like where we are.
I think that's an important thing that I was thinking about, and I only got a few seasons back, but I think this might be, at least under Bob, the earliest last Wednesday game that the Hounds have had in years, right? And you look at the schedule, and there are Wednesday games almost every week for the rest of the season in the league, right? And so we've hit our busiest part of the season. We get to settle into that rhythm of focus on training, focus on travel when we need to, but we're not doing those quick turnarounds. We're not doing those long trips on short rest. And other people are, and that's only in our benefit, right? So I kind of I like that, and it gives me a little bit more hope as well than maybe I would have had before I looked at that.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, that is what we think. Let us know what you think. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me this evening. And thanks to everyone for watching, listening to this one. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're getting this, and we will be back with more Hounds content very, very soon.
See ya.
See ya.